In the frozen wilds of Midgard, beneath the shadow of the towering Hjalmstörr, a mute scribe named Vilhjálmr lives a life of quiet service. Known for his skill in carving runes of protection and remembrance, he is a man of unyielding will, though his voice is bound in silence. But when a fragment of ancient power is unearthed in the heart of a raging storm, his peaceful existence is shattered. The fragment, etched with runes that shimmer with a life of their own, awakens forces long thought dormant. From the icy spires of Jotunheim to the golden halls of Asgard, whispers spread of an artifact capable of rewriting the threads of fate itself. Gods, giants and mortals alike are drawn to its power, each seeking to claim it for their own purposes. Bound by an artifact he barely understands and guided by a cryptic, taunting whisper, Vilhjálmr is thrust into a perilous journey across the 9 realms. As fragile alliances form and betrayals loom, he must navigate a world where nothing is as it seems. The balance of Yggdrasil hangs by a thread, and the determined protector must find his own path through the chaos, one carved not with words, but with the strength of his will. Welcome to Hugin and Munin Stories. This is our story, the Runemaster's Gambit. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Snow. The wind swept through the northlands like a restless spirit, its icy breath howling through the pines and scattering the brittle remnants of the first snowfall. Beneath the shadow of Hjalmstörr, the mountain crowned with eternal frost, lay the village of Brunskoga. It clung to the rugged landscape like a stubborn root, its wooden homes huddled together, as if for warmth against the endless winter. Within a small workshop at the village's edge, Vilhjálmr sat hunched over his workbench. The glow of a lantern cast long shadows across the walls, illuminating shelves lined with talismans and carvings. His calloused hands moved with steady precision, the blade of his carving knife gliding across the surface of pale birchwood. He was etching a protection rune, its sharp lines meant to ward off the wolves that had prowled too close to the village in recent weeks. Vilhjálmr's silence was a constant presence in the village. Born mute, he had learned to let his hands speak for him through the runes he carved, each one imbued with meaning and care. Though he was no warrior, his work had earned him quiet respect among his neighbors. His talismans hung above doorways, adorned the bows of fishing boats, and rested on the graves of the dead. Yet, despite the life he had built, there was a distance between him and the others, a gap he had never sought to bridge. The room was cold, but Vilhjálmr hardly noticed. His focus was on the rune taking shape before him. It was nearly finished, the final stroke just within reach, when an uneasy sensation prickled at the edge of his awareness. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing against his chest. The faint scratching of the knife against wood slowed as his hand stilled. And then he heard it. Vilhjálmr, a voice whispered, soft and resonant, like the murmur of the wind through the trees. He froze. The knife slipped from his grasp, clattering against the floor. His breath caught as he scanned the room, but there was no one else there. The voice had not come from outside, nor from the shadows. It had come from within, a soundless whisper threading through his thoughts. Protector, listener, seeker of threads yet unwoven. The words were not loud, yet they filled the space, curling around him like smoke. His heart pounded as he looked down at the rune on the birchwood. It seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light, a trick of the eye surely. And yet the air was heavy with something unseen, something ancient. "The time has come," the voice continued, its tone both soothing and unsettling. "You have been chosen." Chosen? For what? His hand trembled as he reached for the carving knife, its familiar weight a small comfort, but the voice did not explain. Instead, it fell silent, leaving behind only an oppressive stillness. The lantern flickered, and Vilhjálmr's thoughts churned like a river breaking through ice. The morning after the storm swept through Brunskoga with fury. Trees were uprooted, roofs were torn from homes, and the wind screamed through the mountain passes like a pack of wolves. The villagers gathered in the longhouse, their faces pale and drawn. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing uneasy glances. Many had dreamed of shadowy figures the night before, of voices that whispered warnings of storms yet to come. But Vilhjálmr was not among them. He had left before dawn, his carving tools forgotten on his workbench. The voice had returned in the night, urging him northward with increasing insistence. "Seek," it had said, its tone sharper now. "The fragment awaits." The snow was deep, slowing his progress as he trudged through the forest that bordered the village. The towering pines creaked in the wind, their branches heavy with frost. The path was treacherous, but Vilhjálmr moved with purpose, his steps guided by the strange compulsion that had gripped him. He had no destination, only the pull of the voice and the faint warmth of something deeper, a sense that this was where he was meant to be. Hours passed, the storm growing fiercer with every step. The sky was dark with roiling clouds, and the wind carried a biting chill that gnawed at his exposed skin. Just as doubt began to creep into his thoughts, the trees gave way to a clearing, and Vilhjálmr stopped short. In the center of the clearing, half buried in snow, was a fragment of stone. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, its surface etched with intricate runes that seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. He approached it cautiously, his breath steaming in the frigid air. The voice surged in his mind, louder than ever. "The threads converge here, Protector. Take it. The storm will guide you." Vilhjálmr hesitated, his hand hovering above the fragment. The air around it shimmered faintly, distorting the snow and shadows like heat rising from a fire. When his fingers finally brushed the stone, a surge of energy coursed through him, dropping him to his knees. His vision blurred, and the world around him dissolved into a torrent of images. He saw Yggdrasil, its branches stretching across the heavens, its roots coiling into the depths of existence. He saw a wolf, massive and bound in chains, its golden eyes burning with fury. He saw giants striding across the 9 realms, their footsteps shaking the earth, and the gods standing in their golden halls, their faces grim with determination. The visions came faster and faster until they were a blur of light and shadow, chaos and order. When the vision subsided, Vilhjálmr found himself clutching the fragment. It thrummed with power, its runes glowing faintly in the dim light. His heart pounded as he rose unsteadily to his feet, the weight of the artifact pressing against his chest like a stone. The voice returned, its tone softer now, almost reverent. "They will come for you, Vilhjálmr. Gods, giants, mortals, all will seek the power you now hold. The question is not whether you will stand, but how." By the time Vilhjálmr returned to Brunskoga, the storm had passed, leaving the village blanketed in snow. The villagers watched him warily as he walked through the square, their eyes lingering on the satchel slung over his shoulder. Whispers followed him, murmurs of unease spreading among the crowd. But Vilhjálmr paid them no mind. His thoughts were consumed by the fragment, its warmth a constant reminder of the burden he now carried. As he entered his workshop, he placed it carefully on the table and sat down, his hands trembling. And for the first time in his life, silence filled him with dread. Chapter 2. The Threads of Yggdrasil. Vilhjálmr's footsteps crunched against the snow as he descended from the clearing where he had found the fragment. The artifact pulsed faintly in his satchel, a persistent warmth against the icy chill that seeped through his layers of fur and wool. The whisper remained silent now, its riddles replaced by an unnerving quiet that left his mind to wrestle with his own thoughts. The visions of Yggdrasil and the bound wolf still burned behind his eyes, and he could not shake the feeling that his life had been irreversibly altered. By the time he reached the edge of the village, the first light of dawn spilled across the peaks of Hjalmstörr, turning the snow-capped mountains to molten gold. Brunskoga stirred beneath the light, its inhabitants emerging from their homes to assess the damage from the night's storm. Vilhjálmr kept his head low, avoiding their wary gazes. The weight of the fragment in his satchel felt heavier with every step. He had almost reached his workshop when a firm hand gripped his shoulder. Startled, he turned to see Thrain, the village elder, his face etched with lines as deep as tree bark. The man's sharp eyes fixed on Vilhjálmr with an intensity that made his stomach churn. "You're leaving," Thrain said, his tone heavy with certainty. He gestured to the satchel, his expression darkening. "I've seen the signs, the storm, the dreams, and now you carrying that thing. The gods have marked you, haven't they?" Vilhjálmr hesitated, then nodded. He reached for his carving knife and a scrap of wood from his pocket, quickly etching a rune of confirmation. Thrain's lips pressed into a thin line as he studied it. "You don't understand what you carry, boy," the elder said, his voice trembling with urgency. "The gods and giants play their games, but it's us mortals who pay the price. Whatever power you've stumbled upon, it will bring ruin, unless you have the strength to resist it." Vilhjálmr carved a new rune, a symbol of protection, and pressed it into Thrain's hand. The elder stared at it for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "If you must go, then go," he said, stepping back. "But mark my words, the road you walk is dark and treacherous. And beware the voices that call to you in the shadows. Not all of them speak truth." With that, Thrain turned and walked away, leaving Vilhjálmr standing alone in the snow. The weight of the elder's warning settled heavily on his shoulders, but the fragment's pulse urged him onward. There was no turning back now. Vilhjálmr's journey north was a trial of endurance. The wind grew sharper with every passing day, biting through his cloak and searing his skin. The forest thinned, giving way to barren expanses of ice and rock. He hunted sparingly, his skill with a bow keeping him fed but never full. At night, he huddled by meager fires, the fragment's warmth the only comfort against the bone-deep chill. It was on the third night that the silence was broken. Vilhjálmr had made camp in the crumbled remains of an ancient shrine, its stone walls carved with faded runes that spoke of forgotten gods. As he carved a rune of warmth to hang near the fire, a shadow moved at the edge of the light. His hand froze, and his heart thundered in his chest. Slowly, he reached for the knife at his belt. "Easy, scribe," a voice said, smooth and melodic. A figure stepped into the firelight, cloaked in midnight blue trimmed with silver. Their face was hidden beneath a hood, but their eyes gleamed like molten silver in the darkness. "You carry the fragment," the figure said, their voice sharp with certainty. "And now the gods and giants hunt you. But fear not, I can guide you." Vilhjálmr hesitated, carving a quick rune of inquiry. "Who are you?" The figure smiled faintly and pulled back their hood, revealing a sharp, pale face framed by dark hair. "I am Sigyn," she said. "Some call me the Patient One, though patience has worn thin of late. I have no love for the gods or the giants, but I see what their war has done to the weave. The fragment you carry is the key to repairing what they have broken. The whisper stirred in Vilhjálmr's mind, its voice low and venomous. She lies, protector. She serves another master, one who would see you fall. Sigyn stepped closer, her silver eyes searching his face. I know you hear it, she said quietly. The voice, it whispers sweet promises, doesn't it? But it will twist your thoughts and bind you to its will. Trust it, and you will lose yourself. Vilhjálmr's hand hovered over his satchel, torn between the conflicting voices. Before he could decide, Sigyn's gaze softened. You have a choice, scribe, she said. Trust the whisper, or trust yourself. But choose carefully. The fate of the realms hangs by a thread. With that, she turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Vilhjálmr alone with his doubts. The next day, Vilhjálmr reached the frozen lake. The air grew heavy as he stepped onto the ice, the fragment in his satchel growing warmer with every step. At its center stood a stone pedestal, its runes glowing faintly. As he approached, the whisper surged, its tone sharper than ever. This is the heart of the threads, protector. The first trial awaits. From beneath the ice, shadows stirred. They rose like smoke, coiling into tall, gaunt figures cloaked in tattered robes. Their eyes burned like coals, and their voices echoed like the grinding of glaciers. Mortal, their leader rumbled, his skeletal hand outstretched. You trespass upon sacred ground. The fragment is not yours to wield. Surrender it or face annihilation. Vilhjálmr's hand tightened around the satchel as the whisper hissed in his mind. Do not yield. You are stronger than they know. The Vetir began to chant, their voices weaving a melody that made the ice beneath him tremble. He felt the fragment pulse with urgency, its warmth spreading through his body like fire. With trembling hands, he drew the artifact from his satchel, its runes blazing with light. The chanting faltered, and the Vetir recoiled. Their leader hissed in fury. You do not understand the power you wield, mortal. The rune is a curse, not a gift. It will destroy you. But Vilhjálmr did not listen. He placed the fragment in the pedestal, and a blinding light erupted, scattering the shadows like smoke in the wind. Visions surged through him once more, Yggdrasil's frayed threads, the gods and giants locked in their eternal war, and the fragile balance that held the realms together. When the light faded, the Vetir were gone, and the fragment rested in his hands, its surface smooth and unblemished. The whisper was quiet now, its tone almost reverent. You have passed the first trial, but the path ahead will not be so kind. Vilhjálmr tightened his grip on the fragment and looked to the north. The road ahead was long, but he would not falter. Chapter 3. The Binding of Lies. The icy wind bit at Vilhjálmr's face as he ascended the jagged pass that led toward the far northern plateau. Days had passed since the trial at the frozen lake, and the fragment in his possession now pulsed with a steady, deliberate rhythm, as though attuned to some unseen force. Though the whispers had grown quieter, the tension around him had only deepened, a sense of something vast and ominous, closing in on all sides. The terrain shifted the closer he came to the plateau. The snow thinned to reveal jagged rocks that jutted upward like the teeth of some long-dead beast. Black ice glazed the uneven ground, making every step treacherous. Yet the fragment urged him forward, its warmth growing more insistent with every mile. Vilhjálmr felt the threads of fate pulling tighter around him, drawing him toward a confrontation he could not yet fully comprehend. By the time he reached the plateau, the sky had darkened to a bruised grey. In the center of the barren expanse stood a massive stone arch, its surface inscribed with runes older than the 9 realms. Beyond the arch swirled a churning vortex of light and shadow, the Ginnungagap, the primordial void where the threads of Yggdrasil converged. The sight was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling, a reminder of the ancient powers at play. But he was not alone. From the north came a rumble like distant thunder. Vilhjálmr turned to see the Jotunheim emerging from the storm clouds that churned along the horizon. Their massive forms towered over the landscape, their eyes burning with the cold fire of frost and vengeance. At their head strode a giant clad in armor of ice, his beard a tangle of frost, and his axe slung across his back. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, like glaciers grinding against stone. "Scribe," the giant rumbled, his gaze fixed on Vilhjálmr. "You carry what belongs to us. The rune was forged in the fires of our war with the gods, meant to shatter their dominion and restore balance to the realms. Return it to us, and your life will be spared." Vilhjálmr's hand instinctively tightened around the satchel. He had no voice to answer, but his body spoke his defiance in the way he stepped back, closer to the arch. The frost giant's eyes narrowed. "Do not think to defy me, mortal. The gods would see the realms bound in chains of fate, but we seek freedom. The rune is the key to breaking those chains." Before Vilhjálmr could respond, a trumpet blast echoed through the air. From the south came another force, their golden armor gleaming even in the dim light of the storm. The Aesir had arrived, their banners bearing the raven sigil of Odin flapping in the icy wind. The host moved in disciplined formation, their horses' hooves crunching against the frozen ground. At their head rode Odin himself, cloaked in black, his single golden eye burning with divine intensity. Gungnir, his famed spear, gleamed in his hand, its tip etched with runes of power. He dismounted with fluid grace and strode forward, his gaze fixed on Vilhjálmr. "Do not listen to their lies, mortal," Odin said, his voice sharp and commanding. "The giants would wield the rune to unmake the 9 realms, casting all into chaos. The rune is a blight, a weapon born of primordial darkness. Give it to me, and I will ensure it is destroyed." The frost giant snarled, his breath steaming in the cold. "Do not trust the All-Father, scribe. His words are honeyed lies, meant to keep mortals in their place. The gods care only for their own power, not the balance of the realms." Vilhjálmr's chest tightened as both forces loomed closer, their words cutting through the frigid air like blades. The fragment burned against his chest, its warmth intensifying as if in response to their growing hostility. The whisper surged, sharp and urgent. "They seek to bind you, Protector, both of them. But you are more than their pawn. You are the weaver of the threads. Trust in yourself." Odin's gaze bore into him, his tone softening to something resembling persuasion. "You are no warrior, Vilhjálmr. You are unfit to bear such a burden. Hand over the rune, and I will ensure it is dealt with properly." The frost giant took a step forward, his massive axe gleaming in the dim light. "You have no reason to trust the gods, scribe. Their games have left the realms fractured and weak. Join us, and we will see the weave remade in justice and freedom." Vilhjálmr's mind raced. He did not trust the giant's promises of freedom, nor did he believe in the gods' assurances of destruction. Both spoke of balance, yet their actions betrayed their hunger for dominion. And in the midst of their clamor, the whisper urged him onward, to the arch, to the Ginnungagap, to the heart of the threads. Before either side could react, Vilhjálmr turned and sprinted toward the arch. The frost giant roared in fury, and Odin shouted a command. The Jotunheim hurled shards of ice that shattered against the ground, while Odin's spear, Gungnir, streaked through the air like a comet. Vilhjálmr ducked beneath it, the weapon's runes blazing as it struck the ground behind him. The fragment in his satchel burned hotter, its power thrumming in time with his racing heartbeat. With a final desperate leap, he crossed the threshold of the arch. The Ginnungagap engulfed him, and the world dissolved into light and shadow. He felt as though he were falling and flying at once, his body weightless and unbound. The threads of Yggdrasil stretched before him, infinite in number, each one glowing faintly with the light of a life, a choice, a destiny. Yet many of them were frayed, their ends unraveling into chaos. The fragment in his hand pulsed with energy, its runes blazing with the light of creation itself. The whisper returned, but this time it was not a command, it was a question. What will you do, Protector? Will you bind the threads, or leave them to fray? Will you preserve what is, or allow what could be? Vilhjálmr's hands trembled as he gazed at the frayed threads. The faces of his people flashed before his mind, those he had carved runes for, those who depended on him. The realms were fragile, their balance delicate. He could not leave them to chaos. Taking a deep breath, Vilhjálmr pressed the fragment to the threads. Light erupted, brighter than the sun, and the threads began to mend, their frayed edges knitting together in a tapestry of infinite complexity. The power of the rune surged through him, and for a moment he felt as though he were a part of Yggdrasil itself, his spirit entwined with its eternal roots. When the light faded, the Ginnungagap was silent. Chapter 4. The Weave Reforged. Vilhjálmr awoke to a strange silence. The swirling chaos of the Ginnungagap was gone, replaced by a calm, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. He lay at the base of Yggdrasil, its massive roots twisting across the horizon like the bones of the earth. The air here was thick with power, the faint hum of the threads resonating through his chest. He sat up slowly, his body heavy with exhaustion. The fragment was gone, its power spent, but he felt its presence still, as though it had become a part of him. The threads of Yggdrasil were whole again, their light weaving a tapestry of harmony and balance that stretched across the realms. Yet he knew the cost of this restoration was far from settled. The silence was broken by a low rumble. Vilhjálmr turned to see two figures approaching from opposite sides of the great tree, Odin and the frost giant leader. Both bore the marks of their struggle. Odin's cloak was torn and blood-stained, while frost clung to the giant's battered armor, but their weapons hung idle at their sides. They regarded Vilhjálmr with expressions of wary respect, their earlier hostility tempered by the gravity of what had occurred. "You have done what neither god nor giant could," Odin said, his voice heavy with something resembling regret. His single golden eye flicked to the now mended threads of Yggdrasil. "The weave is restored. Balance endures for now. Yet do not think this is an end, mortal. The work of fate is never finished." The frost giant rumbled a low laugh, his breath steaming in the cold air. Spoken like a true coward, Allfather, always scheming, always grasping for control. He turned his gaze to Vilhjálmr. "But you, scribe, you have proven yourself. No mortal has walked so far into the heart of the threads and lived to tell of it." Vilhjálmr met the giant's gaze, his own calm but resolute. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and withdrew his carving knife, etching a single rune into the frost-coated ground. "What now?" the rune asked, its lines sharp and deliberate. The giant's laughter boomed again, but it lacked malice. "What now indeed? The realms will heal for a time. But the gods will always meddle, and the giants will always rise to challenge them. Perhaps you have bought peace for an age, scribe, but only an age. Balance is as fleeting as a snowflake. Odin stepped forward, his expression sharp. You are no ordinary mortal, Vilhjálmr. The weave chose you for a reason, though its wisdom often escapes even us. Do not waste this gift of life you have earned. The 9 realms will remember your name. He paused, his tone softening. And so will I. The frost giant sneered but said nothing, his gaze lingering on the mended threads for a long moment. Without another word, he turned and strode into the mists, his massive form disappearing into the shadows of Jotunheim. Odin followed suit, his host retreating southward toward Asgard. Vilhjálmr was left alone beneath the great tree, its branches stretching into infinity above him. The journey back to Brunskoga was long and solitary. Though the whisper was gone, replaced by an unnerving quiet, Vilhjálmr felt no fear. The fragment's power had marked him, and though the gods and giants had withdrawn for now, he knew they would always watch him from afar. When he returned to the village, the air was thick with unease. The villagers gathered in the square as he approached, their faces pale with fear and uncertainty. Thrain stepped forward, his sharp eyes scanning Vilhjálmr's weathered face. You've been gone a long time, the elder said. The storm passed, but the signs remain. What have you done, boy? Vilhjálmr pulled a scrap of birchwood from his satchel and carved a single rune into its surface. Restored. The villagers murmured among themselves, their voices a mix of relief and apprehension. Thrain studied the rune for a long moment before nodding, his expression grim but resigned. Balance is a fragile thing, he said quietly, and those who carry its burden rarely find peace. But you've done your part, scribe. That much is clear. Vilhjálmr offered no response. He returned to his workshop, its familiar walls and tools unchanged despite all that had happened. As he set his carving knife on the workbench, he felt a strange sense of calm. The world was whole again, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly free. That night, Vilhjálmr dreamed of Yggdrasil. He saw its branches stretching across the heavens, its roots binding the realms together in a web of light. He saw the faces of the gods and giants, their expressions shadowed and unreadable. And he saw himself, standing at the base of the great tree, the determined protector, a mortal who had carved his own path in a world ruled by forces far greater than himself. When he woke, the dream lingered like the scent of pine after a storm. He rose and began to carve, his hands steady as they etched new runes into the wood. For the first time in a long while, he felt no need for words. The runes spoke for him as they always had, and somewhere in the distance, beyond the mountains and the mists, the threads of Yggdrasil hummed softly, their harmony restored. And with that, we say goodbye for this time. Thank you for listening to our story, The Runemaster's Gambit.